Right. Hi, Dinah.
I'm great, thank you.
That's good.
Yourself?
Yep, I'm not too bad.
Cool.
Hi, everyone.
Hi
Good
there.
evening.
Hi.
Hi there.
Just having some technical problems. Can you hear me? Everybody hear me? Can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah, but you're quiet.
Yeah.
Good evening. We're just waiting for a few more to join us.
Speak.
Whoops. Hope it's working. Why is it not working? Where's? Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Dark. It's dark. Hi, G. Oh. Fantastic, Marie, Claude, Jen, Mark, Colleen, Sam. Oh, you don't mind me shouting your names. Diana, lovely to see you again, Diana. Sakina! Sakina's on! Sakina's on. I'm excited. Mark Worley, yes. So we're just waiting for a few people to come on. Ian's on. Sam's on. Maddie, welcome. Thank you so much for today. So just waiting for a few more people. Claude, not seen you for a while. Hope you're well.
Yeah, you've not seen me for a while. I've not seen you. You've been, every time I see videos of you, you're either carrying food parcels or cooking up something. Can't get you out of that kitchen nowadays, is it? That big kitchen doing.
It feels like it's a lot, but it's not. Honestly, although it's once a week. I don't know how these people who have restaurants and takeaways. I don't know how they do it. I love doing it one day a week. Ian's there with us, Sakina, and there's many others with us. But I love doing it. I mean, we cook all the time, don't we? So you don't realize that something that we do every day, is really interesting. I've learned so much in these last 10 weeks. It's 10 weeks now. But yeah, it's been amazing. It's been amazing these last few weeks. And then I look forward to tonight as well. How have you been?
You're doing a good job.
Great team. We have a great team. I don't do it alone. Sakina's here tonight.
Who?
Sakina, the founder of Preston Windrush.
Okay.
So,
where's that? Who's that?
Sakina, she's up on mine. She's up above.
All right, I can see her over in the left on mine.
Yeah,
she's in a dark room. She's in a dark room for some reason. Making a room dark.
Oh, don't get us started. You're muted. You're on mute, Sakina.
Click the add to Chrome button.
I think we can hear someone's phone. Everybody's muted at the moment. I don't know why, but everybody's muted. We're just waiting for Anthony.
Should we be muted?
No, because at the beginning we can all, as long as we.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, Jean. Welcome. As long as it's one by one, we're okay. Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, Glenda.
Welcome.
How are you?
I'm good. Glenroy. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Usually it takes about 10-15 minutes. I'm sure I saw Jen. I was going to ask you to do something. It was to post something. Oh, the letter. The letter to the MPs. Just in case. Ah, Anthony's here. Anthony's here.
Hello, Anthony.
Yeah. So as you all are aware, we have these meetings every Tuesday night. They've been really successful. I get a lot from it, and I hope that you all do too. What we tend to do is introduce, because then by the time everybody comes in, probably don't have as much time. But if you can, in 60 seconds, introduce yourself, where you're from. If you've been to these meetings before, if you could share some feedback of what you got from it, and also, and we'll try and introduce as many people as possible. If you don't want to be on, video, because we do video all our meetings, although we want to see you because we like to see who you are. But again, like I said, you're welcome to turn off your video. I don't think there's anything else. Oh, respect everybody else. If you've got any questions throughout the conference, we try and we want everybody to have the ability, and honestly, it's a safe place to share your information or your stories or your questions. Put it in the chat. There is at the bottom of the screen, it says reactions. So you can either wave to ask a question, thumbs up if you agree, and that helps us when we do our summaries. We're still learning, and we're still trying to get things moving. But what I tend to say, this is very much by ear, by ear, sorry, by ear, not by air. Anthony, welcome. You're here early. Fantastic.
Good evening, Glenda. Good evening, everyone.
Looking dapper. So I'm going to start with on my left, Diana. Could you introduce yourself in 60 seconds? Speak loudly, and if everybody could mute till I introduce you to share who you are.
Hello, everybody. My name's Diana Martin. I live in a village outside Lancaster. And I joined last week for the first time. Thank you very much, Glenda and everybody else. To learn, really. There are not a lot of people of colour in my life. Although there are two in my family. They all live in the south, so I don't see them very often. But I feel really exhilarated by the wave of what's happening at the moment, because it feels like really things might change. And I want to be part of that. Just to say, last week was really interesting. Anthony gave a talk. And I was really interested in the papal bulls that he was talking about, that were the origin of the racist attitude and the colonial attitude to indigenous peoples and enslavement. And then there was a general talk about how everybody hated the BAME label, yes, which was also really interesting. So thank you.
You're welcome, absolutely welcome. And it's good to see you again. And as I said, stay in touch, honestly, stay in touch. Sakina.
Yes.
Are you all right to introduce yourself briefly in 60 seconds? Introduce who you are. And I know you've not been able to attend as many of these, but it's really good to see you tonight.
Thank you. My name's Sakina. I am the founder of Preston Windrush Generation and Descendants UK. I started this group last year because my 13-year-old daughter, on applying for a passport, got declined. And we had to prove that we were British, even though we were born in the UK. And my father is white British, but because his name went on my birth certificate at the time of my birth, they said I took my nationality through my mother's father, my grandfather. So anyway, I got that sorted out. My status through the Windrush Task Force. I've always been a British citizen since the time of my birth. So now I just want to help other people get their status sorted, or if they didn't know about it, like I didn't know. Basically, just to help others. So this is why I started a group.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sakina. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Marie. Welcome
Good
again.
evening. Welcome. Thank you, Glenda. Welcome, good evening, everybody. My name is Marie Johnson. I live in London, in Hackney, Stoke Newington area. I work as a family therapist in child and adolescent mental health service in Newham. I've been coming to the Tuesday sessions maybe about 3 or 4. I'm not sure how many I've been to. And I was introduced to this group by Paula Campbell on another WhatsApp group that I'm on. And I don't know of anybody personally that's been affected by the Windrush, but I know that it's people of either my generation or quite close to me, and just got involved so I can support in any which way I can. I've been coming to the Tuesday sessions, which I found very informative from a historical point of view. I'm always interested in history and trying to look at things, how they fit into context, because context is always important.
I agree.
When you look at things, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm here to help and support in any way I can. That's
Fantastic. Thank you, and welcome again. Jean.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jean Prescott. I'm part of a group called Septus Severus in Coventry, a social action group. I'm also part of the National Windrush organisation, and I tune in when I can because there's some interesting topics that I like to listen to. That's
Fantastic. Fantastic. And it's good to see you, Jean.
Thank you.
You're welcome. On to Venetia. Welcome again.
Hi, nice to be back.
Is it Spain or Portugal?
Sorry?
Is it Spain or Portugal?
Athens, Greece.
Athens. Okay. We've got you, we got Jen, so brilliant. Great to see you again. Would you like to introduce yourself, love?
Yeah, so I've been on this group a couple of times. I've been researching for a few months for my master's dissertation, the causes of the Windrush Scandal, speaking to a few people who've been affected, as well as people who are working on it from a legal and activist perspective. Just here to learn and keep learning, and it's great to be part of this group. It always gives me a lot of energy, even at the end of the day.
Fantastic, thank you. Wonderful, really fast. Hi, Sam. Mr.
Hello.
Britterman.
Well, I'm Sam. I was a victim of the government dirty, nasty law, and I lost 2 jobs on their behalf. And I met Glenda, Anthony, and Sakina, and I've been with them ever since. And welcome new faces and old faces. That's all.
Fantastic, thank you. Jen.
Hi, my name's Jen. I grew up in Preston. My friend Sueli introduced me to this group. She's from the, she'll introduce herself. And I've been coming for maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks, and I'm learning so much. I'm delving deep into finding out more. And I've been reading a lot about reparations this week. I'm quite interested to know more if anyone's going to talk about reparations and what they mean for them, because yeah.
Thank you. Have you finished, Jen? Sorry. Okay. Maddie, welcome to the first Windrush Conference Free Talk.
Thank you.
And thank you for today.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you might have to
Good.
speak up. I think some of our speakers are
Okay.
quite low.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, you're welcome for today. It was a pleasure. Yes, so my name is Maddie. I work mainly with Italian language. I do various things like translating and teaching. And today I did some interpreting for Glenda's family, which is how I came to know about this group. I'm just here to listen, and I'm very keen to learn and help in any way I can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we met at the gathering for the
Yes.
the George Floyd at Preston Flag Market. I'll tell you about what happened with my daughter, but yeah, I'm a new granny. Michael.
Hi.
You want to quickly, briefly introduce yourself? Welcome.
I'm Mike Balshaw. I'm from Preston, and I joined you for the first time last week, and I'm here to learn. And I was very interested in what Anthony Brown spoke about last week, and I've been doing my homework since. And yeah, I mean, I'm just appalled at some of the stories that I hear. You know, I mean, you know, I think that's
fantastic.
Not for me.
Brilliant. No, it's good to see you again, Michael. Honestly, thank you very much for joining. Anthony, I'm going to come to you at the last. Nicola, hi. Are you all right to unmute? Would you like to?
I just muted it because my dog starts barking, so I thought I'll just mute it.
Oh, wonderful. I know you've got a Lancashire accent. Brilliant, strong Lancashire
Yeah,
accent.
I'm from Preston. I actually watched the Is Preston Racist debate with yourself, well, the chat the other week. And then one of the ladies there asked if I wanted to come and listen on here. And I forgot last week. So I thought, right, I need to remember tonight. So just interested to see what it's about. You know, my grandparents are part of the Windrush generation, but they both passed away now. I do know a lot about my own West Indian history because I've traced it back till the 1700s.
Wow.
So I am knowledgeable on my family and what they've gone through over the years. So yeah, I just thought I'd come on and see what really.
Fantastic. And you're from Preston?
Yeah. I'm from Preston. I know a lot of people in Preston.
Wonderful. And you've got the surname Brakel.
Well, it's not really. It's Hermit, but I've changed it to my mum's.
I know the Hermit family.
Pardon?
I know the Hermit family.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Fantastic.
I am a hermit, but I use my mum's surname.
Welcome, though. Welcome, Nicola.
Thank you.
Hi, Suli.
Oh, hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Glenda. Good evening, all. I'm Swelly. I'm friends of lots of people here. And I work with Colleen as well at UCLan. I work with the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion kind of area. I'm here more on a advocate, a campaigner, activist capacity. I fully support the Black movement, the Black Lives Matter, and also the Windrush cause. So I've been supporting the group co-founded by Sakina and Glenda, and giving space at the university, but also in the community, helping them and supporting them the way I can. So yes, I'm looking forward for tonight.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've had a debate already today, haven't we? Wait, hang on, I'm lost. Okay, Glenroy's next. Good evening, Glenroy. Welcome again.
Yes, greetings everyone. My name is Glenroy Watson. I'm a trade unionist in London Transport, and I'm also the secretary of our Reparation international campaign local chapter in the UK called Global African Congress. I might take the liberty as we go along to post some stuff in the chat room, as we're having a lobby of Parliament tomorrow. It's an annual lobby of Parliament. It's normally done the first Wednesday in June, but obviously with COVID-19, etc., we've shifted it around. It's a total Zoom situation with breakout room, etc. The technology is kind of flooring me, actually. I don't really get the full gist of it, but yeah, tomorrow is our lobby of Parliament, so I'll put something up later on.
Fantastic. Thank you, and welcome again. Good evening, Alison. Sorry, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Alison, you might have to speak up a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Hello, I'm here for the first time.
You're welcome.
I heard about it from my neighbours, Diana and Fiona. They're neighbours of mine just outside Lancaster. I'm a kind of former journalist and filmmaker.
Wow.
And I'm really interested about hearing about reparations, because my father's family fled from the Nazis. He was Jewish and got reparations after the war. And it's just really interesting, the parallels that the Jews got reparations, but the Windrush generation and the descendants of slavery haven't. So I'm really here to learn and listen.
Thank you, and welcome again. Claude.
Hi there, Glinda.
Hi.
Hi there, Anthony.
Hello, Claude.
Yeah, my name's Claude.
On my screen.
Claude Hendrickson from Leeds. I'm part of the Windrush Generation network. I'm very interested in compensation and ensuring people get compensation, but I'm also quite interested in compensation for some of those communities that actually were hit by negative reporting over the years. So I'm interested in community transfer assets to compensate communities, Black communities that are underrepresented because they don't have no infrastructure, mainly buildings. So I'm still a part of the pushing for compensation for the individuals, but I still think we need to look at compensating communities. And I pop in when I can. I'm quite busy, so I want to keep giving support to Anthony and Glenda because they're doing a lot of good work, and the Windrush Defenders. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. I won't stay for the whole meeting. I never do, because I've just come off a Labour Party meeting, which was 3 hours. You know, it's crazy. So yeah, good to see that it's still going on and you're still keeping it ticking, Glenda. Well done.
Thank you, Claude. I can't wait till we can come back down to Leeds, because I'm looking for that food, that West Indian food. You know what I mean? Them coconut cakes. Them coconut cakes.
I know exactly what you're waiting to come back.
Yes, exactly. Going on, Ian, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and what you've been up to as well, quickly, in 60 seconds?
Dear God. Sorry I wasn't here last week. I was ill. I'm a photographer. I generally help on a Friday, and I do most of the photography for the group. Is that quick enough?
Yes, thank you. Ian helps us on a Friday at the Windrush Community Response Kitchen. Paula, good evening. Welcome.
Hi, Glenda. Good
Hi,
to see you. Hi. Yay. I'm just trying to help in whatever way I can, really, to support the group, because I believe that it's really important that people receive the actual compensation that they're due and citizenship, because they have lived here all their lives, and that is just really what they're owed, you know, as a bottom line. So yeah, I'm just willing to support.
Thank you, Paula. Mark, is your audio still working, Mark? I know we saw him in the chat. I don't know if his audio's working. While we're waiting for Mark, Colleen, good evening, my dear.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. How are you?
Hi.
I'll quickly introduce myself in 60 seconds. I know Glenda personally. She's a very good friend of mine, as is Swelly. I work at UCLan, and I'm the admin assistant for the community engagement team. I'm also an ex-co-chair of the Staff BME network, where I work closely with Swelly, and I support this Preston Windrush Food Hub every Friday by helping prepare the meals with Glenda. I've also been involved in Preston Caribbean Carnival, been on the committee. I mean, I'm quite a friendly person, so I'm involved in like lots of community events, such as like, let me see, I play a third or free in a samba band, so I do lots of performing with that. The reason why I want to be involved, why I come to this forum, is just so I can get some more, some knowledge and some information about my generation, the Windrush generation, and my heritage, because both my parents died when I was very, very young, so I don't really have that information. So that's why I'm interested in getting involved in the Windrush, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Colleen, and welcome again.
Thank you.
Fiona, can't see you tonight.
No, you can't. But anyway, hello.
Information.
So I've been coming for 5 weeks, just to listen and learn. And I appear to have brought my neighbours Diana and Alison with me now. And I followed my niece Jen and my daughter Anna.
Fantastic. Are you okay, Fiona?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I've just been in wall-to-wall Zoom since 5 o'clock. This is the third one since 5 o'clock.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Well, hopefully we'll get to see you later. Quickly, Daniel, welcome again. Can you hear me? Or is it...
I can. How are you doing?
Oh, there you are. Sorry. Hi.
I am. I'm in 2 meetings again, so I'm with you, and I'm with a church alpha meeting as well.
So, do you want to briefly introduce yourself in 60 seconds?
Yes. So I am Duckworth councillor for Shara Green Ward in Preston. I've been recently delivering meals with Glenn and all the team, and it's been amazing. I joined in last week, and it was a pleasure to listen to. I learned a lot. Yeah, and I'm born and bred in Preston.
Fabulous. And you came to the meeting last week. How did you find it?
Oh, it was amazing. The amount I learned from that meeting last week, it opened my eyes to a lot. It was a privilege to be invited, and it did open my eyes to an awful lot. So thank you, everybody who was there here.
Fantastic, and it's good to see you again, and I look forward to meeting you again on Friday. Michael, welcome. Good evening, Michael Dawkins. Do you want to? We can't see you. Could you briefly introduce yourself in 60 seconds? Can you hear me, Michael? Okay. Mark, can you hear me? Do you want to introduce yourself before I introduce Anthony? Mark?
Right, babe.
Okay. Anthony, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll get on to the beginning of the talk for tonight,
Okay.
which is about the Windrush Generation and the church history.
Yes.
And the reason why we wanted to talk about that subject, and I think Anthony's going to highlight it as well, is because a lot of, and he touched on it last week and the week before about the papal bull, but a lot of our family history comes from that church. And I noticed that when we went to Westminster, the people I was meeting around the Windrush generation, but it was also interesting, there's not many church organizations campaigning, promoting the Windrush Scandal. And we wanted to touch this. Now, it is going to be in 4 to 5 parts. So we've got this evening with Anthony Brown, great historian, absolutely amazing. And in a couple of weeks, we've got Clive Foster and many, many others that will be joining Anthony because they all want to do some research. So it's going to be great. And I think Suli was saying to me about, hopefully we can get, is it Rabina? Not Rabina, not Rabina, what's the name? I can't remember the lady's name. What's her name?
Lubina Himid.
Yes. So Anthony, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Anthony Brown. I'm the chairman of Preston Windrush, and I'm also co-founder of Windrush Defenders. It's a community interest company that's based in Manchester, and we organise surgeries to help people who have been affected by the Windrush Scandal. We help them with their applications to the Windrush Scheme, and we also help them with their applications to the Compensation Scheme. And we've just worked over the last few weeks to put together a consortium, a national consortium, to tender for the Windrush Claims Assistance. We've heard in the news that there's been a lot of problems with people getting the compensation and getting the support that they need. And the Home Office said, well, you know, is there anybody else that can do it? So we said, we put our hands up, and a number of other people have put their hands up and put a tender in, and we hope to hear in August how that went. So we're pretty much involved in the whole Windrush situation. We also, we meaning myself and Glenda, attend what's called the Windrush Stakeholders Advisory Group with the Home Office. That was convened by the Home Secretary last September, and we've been meeting quarterly to report on how the scheme is going in each area, and then listen to what the Home Office has to say about that. And they ask various questions, and they respond as well. We often have a good debate with them, or email them and write to them and so on. So we're pretty much aware of what's happening and what needs to be done to make things better for the Windrush generation. So that's me. I'm going to try to do something I've never done before, which is share a screen and do a talk from a PowerPoint, because I've tried to put something together for this talk just to create some points.
Okay, 1 second. Julie, while I'm trying to do that, oh, here we go. Julie, would you like to introduce yourself? Julie. Okay, Anthony.
Can I share yet?
Yeah, I've made you co-host.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so the Windrush generation. The Wendy Williams Windrush Lessons Learned review describes the Windrush generation as those who came from 1948 to 1st of January 1973. Now, in 1948, we had the British Nationality Act that was passed, and that made everybody in the Commonwealth, in the Caribbean included, citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies. After the war, a number of people had gone back, a number of soldiers, servicemen had gone back to the Caribbean, and they wanted to come back, or they needed to come back off leave. And the British government sent the Windrush to pick them up, and they picked up a number of people, you know, around the Caribbean, but there was still space on the ship, and the people who crewed the ship had a great idea to sell cheap tickets. So quite a number of Jamaicans bought these cheap tickets, and then the Windrush sailed with over 1,000 people to come back to the UK. And on the 22nd of June 1948, it landed at Tilbury Docks, and that started a story about the Windrush generation. Waves of Caribbean people came to the UK after that because they needed to rebuild after the war. And the government decided that they would start to restrict people. They made countries in the Caribbean independent, and with that, those independent acts, people lost their citizenship of the UK. Even those who lived in the UK lost their citizenship and they weren't aware. In 1971, the Immigration Act was passed, and that made people immigrants in their own country, because Britain was their own country. They'd built Britain, they'd been enslaved for generations, were part of Britain. And the Immigration Act was passed, and from the 1st of January 1973, those people who were originally British were given by law indefinite leave to remain, but a lot of them didn't know this. But where did those people come from, and how come there are all these black people in the Caribbean? Well, as we were saying last week, there was a number of papal bulls that were issued by the Pope, and that gave the right to Portugal in 1452 to attack Saracens, or Muslims as they are now, and attack pagans, Africans, and make them slaves in perpetuity. So the Portuguese started enslaving people. The Spanish, who were competing with the Portuguese, sent Christopher Columbus off to the New World, and then discovering all that, the Pope then decided to divide the world between Portugal and Spain. So to the east of a particular line, Portugal was able to, had the rights to take people and enslave people. And to the west, which New World, Spain had the right. I'm just going to admit somebody here. Now, other European nations looked on and saw all these Spanish galleons with gold coming from the New World to Spain, and thought, you know, we should have some of that. And one of those nations was Britain. And in 1649, just to bring it home, Oliver Cromwell had defeated the parliamentary forces at Preston, and that ended the Second English Civil War, and it created the Commonwealth of Scotland, England, Wales, and Ireland, and that lasted from 1649 to 1660. But in that period, Cromwell built up the English Navy and sent them off to take the island of Hispaniola, which was the main island in the Caribbean that the Spanish held. But it was a bit too much for the forces that he'd sent, and they were beaten back. And so as not to go back empty-handed, they sailed on, and in 1655, they captured Jamaica from Spain. And as you can see on the Jamaican coat of arms, there are some people there who lived on the island at the time. They are called Tainos. Some people call them Arawaks, but they're actually Tainos. And you have other people in the Caribbean who were called Caribs. And what Christopher Columbus did was said that they were cannibals in order to have the justification to enslave them. And so a lot of the Tainos and the Arawaks and the Caribs were slaughtered. A lot of them were given diseases. I mean, we talk about the coronavirus pandemic now. In the Caribbean, they'd never heard of smallpox or measles, but when the Europeans came, they were defenseless in their immune system against new diseases. So a lot of them died out with these diseases. And as you can see with the Jamaican coat of arms, it's still got the red ensign. That's still the coat of arms of Jamaica, even though it's independent. I grew up with that, and with the motto, out of many, one people. Now, on the island of Jamaica, people are now largely African, although it's mixed. There are Chinese, there are Indians, there are white people, but most of them are African. So what I'm going to tell you now is a bit about what I personally researched, because I said in one of my talks that when I was growing up, the Bible was my history book. You know, when we were taught the Bible, people, you know, we were taught that Adam and Eve were the first people, and in the Bible there's a genealogy, and so you then believe that you are descended from Adam and Eve and all these people in the Bible are your ancestors. So that, you know, to a primary school child was history. But then when I got to school and got a history book, and I was looking through the history book, I couldn't find any black people in it. So it was only when I got to Jamaica that I started to get some information. And I learned that the Jamaicans, a lot of people from the Caribbean and in Jamaica were taken, their ancestors were taken as slaves from Ghana, and there are a group of people in Ghana called the Akan people. And if you look at some of the cultural costumes in Jamaica, this is Miss Lou, you see there's a bit of a similarity. They've tried to keep that culture going. But the Akan, what I researched and learned, originated from the Nile Valley. A lot of people don't realize that the Akan migrated from the Nile Valley around 1200 AD, and then settled in West Africa, and then were taken to the Caribbean as slaves. Now, when we start talking about religion, many of us, as we get, you know, our information about religion based on what we get taught in church, in the Bible. We get taught about the Hebrews. And we know, we get in the Bible that the Hebrews were taken away as slaves by the Assyrians. Now, this is a frieze that shows, that depicts Hebrews, but, you know, looking at it, you wouldn't think, they don't look like the Hebrews that you have in the Middle East today. They look African, and you might wonder, okay, well, what's the, how do you know that that's authentic? Well, this is actually in the British Museum. So you can, you know, go to the British Museum and you can see that, you know, these people who were taken from this part of the world were actually African-looking people. The other connections that I've seen about this is this frieze, and this is in this is taken from Egypt, and it's two men stick fighting. And what I didn't understand until I went to Trinidad was that stick fighting was a huge cultural activity, and it's done throughout Africa. And what happened is that because people brought their cultures with them when they were taken from Africa, the stick fighting is still part of Trinidad's carnival. And carnival is a whole other subject in terms of culture. And so what's happened is that people still maintain a lot of the culture that they have that came from Africa through carnival and through a whole range of other things. We're told that religion was used to enslave people, but I argue that that's not possible, because when I look around in the Caribbean, I still see practices that were brought to the Caribbean from Africa. And one of the people who I researched and looked at his teachings was His Imperial Majesty, and he says we must stop confusing religion and spirituality. Religion is a set of rules, regulations, and rituals created by humans, which were supposed to help people spiritually. Due to human imperfection, religion has become corrupt, political, divisive, and a tool for power struggle. Spirituality is not theology or ideology. It is simply a way of life, pure and original, as given by the Most High. Spirituality is a network linking us to the Most High, the universe, and each other. I also looked into what people in the Nile Valley used to believe, and one of the things that I came across was Ma'at, and I don't know if people have heard of the 10 Commandments, but if we look at the 10 Commandments, then we find that a number of the 10 Commandments are similar to the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at. So what used to happen, or what was the practice in Egypt, was that when you died, you would have a number of confessions that was made, that was designed on your behalf. Each of them were particular to you, And the belief was that in the underworld, in the afterlife, you'd go before Osiris and you would recite these negative confessions. I haven't stolen, I haven't been violent, I haven't committed adultery. And if you were, if your heart was weighed, your heart was then weighed, and if your heart was lighter than Ma'at's feather, that feather on a head, then you could pass on into paradise. If it wasn't, then your heart would be dropped on the floor and it would be eaten, and your soul would cease to exist. And in the underworld, you had these 42 gods or spirits, and they represented different principles. And what you find is that in West Africa, you also have what's called orishas. And here we have Shango, which is one of the more powerful orishas. But with orishas, you have hundreds of orishas. And so what happened was, when Africans were taken to the Caribbean, and the Catholics were telling them all about these saints, they said, a lot of them said, well, these saints have attributes and principles like our orishas. And so in certain places, like, for example, Trinidad, you'll find that they would pretend to be Catholics, but they would still be practicing their own religions behind the mask of the saints. And so in Jamaica, they have what's called Obia. Again, that is an African tradition. In places like Haiti, they would call it voodoo. And we've all heard of voodoo. So I ask, well, how can the slaves have been Christian or made slaves by Christianity if they're still practicing voodoo? In Cuba, it's called Santieri. In Brazil, it's called Condorbo. So there are still these practices by millions and millions of people. So religion can't have been the thing that made them slaves. I say it was guns and whips. And so the spirituality then of people in the Caribbean is still maintained, and it's expressed in different ways. Now, I talked earlier about the migration from the Nile Valley and the Hebrews and so on. In Africa, you'll find a number of groups who keep the Sabbath, and they still have the traditions of the Jews. And in Jamaica, the largest denomination are the Seventh-day Adventists, and they keep the Sabbath. And when you go to West Africa and you look at the Akans, they too are keeping the Sabbath. In the Caribbean also, you have all the different denominations. You have the Catholics, you have the Baptists, you have the Church of England. There's a whole range of religions and denominations. But you will find that even though people practice all these different religions, some people will still, go to Obia men, or still have their ancient African traditions that they will still practice. My grandmother, she was a Maroon, and she used to always have different medicines that she would make, and she would say all sorts of strange things. So I question whether it was religion that made people slaves. I think it was brute force and cruelty that made people give up or, you know, continue to work for hundreds of years. I give another example with the Great Rebellion in 1831 with Sam Sharp. People will tell you about William Wilberforce and how he freed the slaves, but they'll never mention Sam Sharp. And he was a Baptist lay preacher, and that meant he was given license to go from plantation to plantation. And what he did was he organized the meetings on each plantation, and the deacons were like lieutenants. And come Christmas 1831, they planned that they wouldn't go back to work. And when the overseers started to beat them and tried to get them to work, they rebelled and they burnt down the plantation houses and began the greatest rebellion that the Caribbean had ever seen. And within a couple of years, Parliament had decided that enough was enough and had passed the Emancipation Act 1834, which freed the slaves. By 1838, they had to do what's called a 4-year apprenticeship, which meant that they could still work for the slave master for 45 hours a week without pay. But eventually, in 1838, slavery ended, and the slave masters were compensated, and the slaves got nothing. So roll on to independence, when Britain decided to make all these countries independent. I believe it was because Britain didn't want to invest in those countries, and so of, or the standard that you would expect, and so they were sort of like cut adrift, and the people were brought here that were needed to work. The Windrush Scheme was put in place after people were found that they didn't have the documentation to prove their legal status. So at the moment, you can apply to the Windrush Scheme. I did that myself, and as Sakina said, she did that too, and I then regained my British citizenship. And the compensation scheme, people who have been affected in ways where they've lost their houses, lost work, or been deported, or been put in detention, can claim against a range of losses. Claude is correct that communities are not actually compensated. The scheme is only for individuals, and what Windrush Defenders is doing is calling for a Windrush Act that places a duty, a legal duty on public bodies to tackle race disparities, because we believe that the Windrush scandal didn't just occur within immigration. The hostile environment was within education, health, it was in employment, it was in criminal justice. And so if we're going to compensate, I say it should be reparations, because reparations means that you're repairing, and it couldn't be more than just money. It could be, what we're doing now is beginning the process of reparations, because until we understand each other, we know how, our own histories and how we relate to each other, and how interlinked we are, we won't be able to repair that relationship. And so reparations is about looking at how you repair things, and some of it might involve money, some of it might just involve talking to people and getting an understanding about each other and developing those bonds again. But in terms of the Windrush Act that we're proposing, we're saying that there should be also a Commonwealth Community Cohesion Fund, whereby communities can bid into that fund to deliver projects that will repair some of the damage that's been done by the hostile environment and the toll that it's had, not only on individuals, but on communities as a whole. Thank you for listening. Shall I put it back to you, Glenda?
Thank you, Anthony. Wow. Wow, you did amazing there. Really, really interesting. Again, like I said before, this is in a few parts. We're looking at 4 to 5 parts. If you've been following us and if you've been also attending these conference free talks, you'll find that they've been very beneficial, but we've done them in parts because we can't discuss or share a lot of the information in one night. And of course, I think you've took it wider. You took it wider. And again, understanding about the Windrush generation. And like last week, we were talking about the labels. But I want to go, and again, if anybody has any questions and you don't get to ask, we do really want everybody to get involved and take part. Please, if you can use the reaction buttons, or put your hand up, I will try. And Jen's here to help me as well. I think she's here. Joan, welcome. Good evening again. Lots of love to you. I've seen a few people coming on. We really do like everybody to get involved. And our first comment is from Suli. Everybody's saying thank you, Anthony. Really, really interesting. Again, like I said, because what we were trying to say, and Anthony wanted to take it right back, was that a lot of people who came from the Caribbean, the Commonwealth countries, came with this spirituality. You can call it religion, you can recall it different denominations, whether you're Catholic, Church of England, Seventh-day Adventist. A lot of people came with this, I don't know what it is, but it's like a community culture in religion back in those days. And I think, saying to today, especially the older generation, they have this. They still have it. When I talk to my mum, she's still there. It's what keeps her going. It's what keeps her alive to a certain extent. And I see that without it, she feels that she hasn't got anything. So this is why we wanted to touch on it. I think it's very important to be recognized, that spirituality that we all hold, I think, is recognized. Suli, you asked an interesting point. Are you there? Suli said she was going to be giving it you tonight.
No, it's interesting. I have another focus on religion in relation to the Black history. But I was just surprised about the quote about Selassie, because I was reading coincidentally this week about this article. I'll see if I can find, and I'll put the link here, because his statue has been destroyed in one of the London parks, and then apparently one of the tribes in Ethiopia said he oppressed them, their language, and he banned their religion. So, by the way, the quote was there. It's like he was like more open-minded than what this community in this contemporary world here is arguing. So I don't know if you have seen that article, Anthony.
No, I haven't seen the article, but what you have to remember that Selassie ruled an empire, and when you're a ruler, you not only have political power, but you have military power, and you use your military to crush rebellions and upstarts. Every ruler does it. And, you know, in ruling Ethiopia, you will find that over time, there were a number of people who, you know, Selassie fought against, or they rebelled against Selassie, and he used his army to crush them. And in the end, the army deposed him and killed him. So that's what happens in countries and politics. I mean, look at Britain. It had how many civil wars and how many, you know, kings chopped off another king's head and so on and so forth. That's just the nature of politics.
Thank you. Hang on. Michael has a question. You're on mute, Michael. Sorry, darling. Do you want me to unmute you?
Can you hear?
Yep.
Yeah. What was does Anthony know, or Sule, the Oromo people, were they Christian or Muslim, or does anybody know? What religion did these Oromos that they were crushed, what were they?
I'm not sure about what religion they are, but I think their position at the moment is that they think that they should be ruling.
I've got Glenn right. One sec. Sorry, who was that? Glenn Roy?
Yes, greetings, comrade. A couple of things, typically me and Anthony don't agree on. First of all, and I think there's a real need to write the history of this German ship that was higher. Anthony made it sound like, you know, they just decided on a cruise to come back to England. But my understanding is that these were British African soldiers from the Caribbean who had come to fight in the British Army, who purchased or hired the ship. Then they sent out invitation and invite people to be part of that exercise to come back to the UK, because as you rightly said, Anthony, the British did not intend to give much resource, if any, to the so-called colonies or stolen known. I also think, and there are documentary evidence to support it, that says that the whole emphasis around wind of change was more about responding to the land lease exercise that had taken place during the war. But it's wrong to imply that these countries in the Caribbean hadn't been fighting, maybe not militarily, but fighting to gain independence. But on reflection, clearly it's not as well thought out, because they ended up with flag and anthem independence and very little economic control over their own territory. But that's another story I hope we'll get onto. Can I say about the Ethiopian situation? It's a very mixed bag politically in that region, because what's actually going on, as far as I can judge, is that this is a provocation by Egypt. The situation of the Nile and the attempt to build dam by a number of nations further down the Niles to generate electricity and so on is something that Egypt is opposed to and has been fomenting dispute in that region between various nations. And I don't call them tribes. I think, you know, it's a terminology that's only meant to denigrate people. We have nations, we have clear rules and identification. So it isn't a case of this tribe against that tribe. It is this nation against other nations. But I think people need to do a little bit more investigation into the politics of what's going on, because it's deeply entrenched within the resource that's available in the Nile, and that Egypt believe that it owns all of that. And if you look at the map, there's quite a number of countries who benefit from the Nile Valley situation. But thank you for the entering the religious debate. I always think it's something that's very perilous, can end up upsetting a lot of people, or indeed having a philosophical debate, because people are very, you know, deep in their religion. Now, I have never heard, Anthony, I have to say, the suggestion that somehow religion was the driving force for enslavement. I think for most people, it is the force that continues to hold people down, in the sense that they've created some sort of loyalty towards Western religion. And Africans may have been practicing it, our own religion quietly, our own spirituality, but the reality is the public facade of a European religion is very ingrained. And we have to see that in the Caribbean and places like that. It's a very deep issue. People will fight you, I think, around their religious belief. Obia might still be practiced, voodoo might still be practiced in certain places, but it has become an underground activity. It's not a public display. So the loyalty to Western religion is very deep, both on the continent and in the Caribbean and so on. So I don't believe I've ever heard anyone suggest, you know, even when they were sailing on the good ship Jesus to go and capture our people and bring them back to the West, that it was necessarily a religious campaign, a crusade of any kind. It was driven by greed, exploitation, oppression, etc., etc. But once people were on the plantation, in order to force them to remain enslaved, there was a lot of effort to make them religious in the Western sense. But at the same time, and you mentioned various religious leader led rebellion campaign, these were a few selected people who were allowed to learn to read. So the idea of using religion as an oppression is very clear. I don't think it was the driving force. But one thing I hope at some point, Glenda, we will touch on is after emancipation, after 1838, the Catholic Church, I think all the denomination, but predominantly the Catholic Church, were provided out of that money that was used around the enslavement, was provided millions of pounds in those days to educate enslaved Africans. And what they did with that money, what they did with the resource, was predominantly try to create a missionary force with quite a substantial amount of Africans from the Caribbean being in that missionary crusade. And one very important figure, I've forgotten his specific name, but he was sent to what is now Abyssinia in East Africa, where the first thing he did when he got there was to teach the people about rebellion, because he had come from an island. He was a Jamaican, had come from an island. If I remember the precise his name, I'll put it up later on, but he'd come from Jamaica, was educated within the church, and taken as a missionary, the first African from outside of the continent to be a missionary in Africa. And the first thing he did was start a rebellion, start the people fighting against British rule. So he was recalled back to London, never made it. The story is that he was lost at sea on his way back, but obviously I think most people believe he was assassinated on his journey back. But to me, that's how religion is part of this process. It's not a driving force, it's not the leading edge. The leading edge was greed, capitalism, etc., etc. This was simply a tool as part of the process, but it's an important one to analyze, and I'm glad we are doing so now. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, and thank you for your contribution. There's so many people want to respond.
Just let me just briefly respond to
yeah, and then Sully, and then we've got a few comments.
Yeah, you have to look at the facts. We can, theorize about, religion holding people down, but when you look at the facts, there were hundreds of rebellions. There wasn't just one or two or a few. There were rebellions in Demerara, there were rebellions in St. Kitts, there were rebellions in Barbados, there was rebellions everywhere. And you look at Toussaint Louverture, he was a religious person. You look at Nat Turner in the US, again, he was a religious person. Nelson Mandela, religious. Winnie Mandela, religious. Martin Luther King, religious. Religion is a dangerous thing when it comes to slavery. You can't make people religious and hope to keep them slaves. They will use the religion to hide and to practice other things, but you will never be able to see inside their minds as to what they are thinking and what they're planning. And that's what people did all throughout the history of slavery in the Caribbean. You look at the history, you'll see regular rebellions. These were not pious people, peaceful people.
Thank you, Anthony. Sully?
I have a controversial point here. I don't fully agree, Anthony, because going back to the history in this country, for example, I'm reading a book at the moment. It's based on Professor Lubenya artwork, and then there is lots of history in her art, Black history. Mm-hmm. And then actually, when you say the religion was used as by people to enslave other people, but actually history here tells from, everyone heard about the compensation that the slave masters received from the government. And it is, one of her piece art says, it's called The Swallow Heart, the clergy eating the profits of the slave trade. So the artist, she alludes the involvement of the church in the trade to the extent that over 1 million of the 20 million paid in compensation by the British government after 1938, the abolition, former slave owners went to the Church of England. Some clergymen went further than that, not only investing in slave plantations overseas and owned the slave servants themselves. So in 2018, a decade after he made this it's like very caricatural, the act she did. And it says, the runaway slaves in Britain project at the University of Glasgow. I can share they created a database of all this evidence. So I will put in the chat. So and a specific Lancaster example, just around the corner in Lancaster. An anonymous boy who escaped enslavement, and then this boy was a slave of the reverend of the church. So and then they used to put these adverts. I shared with you, Glenda, this afternoon. And then the advert says in the St. James Chronicle in London on September the 10th, 1765, run away from the house of the Reverend Mr. Clarkson, rector of the Haitian near Lancaster, early in the morning of Monday, the 26th of August last. A Negro boy of the Igbo country, is slender made, about 5 feet 3 inches high, his left knee bending inwards, which makes him halt, a small lump on his forehead, because they used to have this forehead marked, with his country marks on his temples, had on, when eloped, a blue jacket, a grey waistcoat, a leather breeches. He speaks, look at this, he speaks broad Lancashire dialect. So it's the first register in Black history in Britain that you had a Black boy who's had a very, very genuine, broad Lancashire accent. So that's my point, that I think the clergy were aware, and even the Quakers in Lancaster, they were aware of the slave trade. Actually was quite delayed, the religious, the members of, the leadership in the religion, members of the Church of England specifically, to react and then to do something against the slave trade. They were, they should be taken accountable, and then they took money and then they profited and they exploited too. And it wasn't, they were the representatives of the religion. They were not other people using the religion in name of God or to enslave people. I understand your point. I just want to make this point that
you make a good point, Suli, but it backs up what I've been saying, because if this boy was a good Christian, what on earth is he doing running away? He was a slave. So what I'm saying is that religion wasn't the thing that kept people in slavery. It was a gun, it was a whip, it was brutality.
Oh,
fear. That's what kept people in slavery. Yes, there were clergymen who owned slaves, but that's not the same as someone who has been enslaved be staying enslaved because they are religious. At every opportunity people got to run away, to sabotage, to rebel, they did it. They didn't sit around thinking, oh, well, I'm enjoying it. If the slave master made conditions very good or livable, then you would find some people went along with it. But if he was brutal or whatever, then he'd have to worry, because at some point or other, things would explode. And I'm saying that the people weren't Christian. You can read accounts of, what missionaries used to say when they tried to convert people in the kind of lives they lived, how they were drinking, how they were doing all kinds of things. So it's a mistake, I think, when you look at the evidence closely, which I did, because I used to feel really ashamed about slavery and thinking, you know, I didn't want my ancestors to be slaves. But when I actually read into it, and if you get a book, I think it's called The Jamaican, but read that book, and it's a complete, it really swept away this myth that I had about, you know, everybody just, you know, following in slavery meekly. No, they rebelled at every turn. We're just not taught that history. We're just given a whole lot of nonsense about, you know, giving them a Bible and, you know, taking the land and so on and so forth. Our ancestors weren't so docile. They came, they were naked and in chains, and then after years, they rose up and they fought and they achieved their own freedom.
Thank you. We've got a few raised hands and we've got a lot of comments. We've got Sakina, and before Sakina comes on, we've got a few people, especially new. Wow, you're testing me now to pronounce your names. Okay, so just briefly before you have, I think it's a question or a comment. Chrysanthus, welcome. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourself? And we've also got Kwaku. Kwaku, thank you so much for joining. You sent me an important, and I'm so glad you came tonight. If you, after Chrysanthus has said her comment, if you could introduce yourself also. Joan and also Sakina has her hands up as well. So Chrysanthus, I've lost her.
Thank you.
Oh no, you're there.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. I was a bit up. Are you getting me?
So that again.
Are you getting me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. I was a bit tip up, so I joined the platform a little late, but I'm happy with Anthony with the presentation. And if I want to ask a question about the religion playing a greater role in slavery, I don't actually know where I can put the question because to me, I'm sorry, I'm Chrysanthus from Cameroon. Yeah, I live in Preston. I am a refugee. I was an asylum seeker, but I just got leave to remain. I'm now a refugee and I reside in Preston. I'm a member of the British the Preston Council Sanctuary Seekers.
Wow, fantastic! Yeah. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. So
welcome.
Yeah, I was invited to this program by Suli. I'm very happy to be invited and to become a participant. So going back to religion playing a role in slavery, I have a question. I don't know how I can put it. I don't know who I'm going to put this question to.
Just say it. Just say it, or you can put it in the chat. But
yeah, because if you want to link religion to slavery, I will say religion played a role because presently, if we go around England, we can only find old churches being that were built some 100 or 200 years ago. But back in Africa, you still find new churches being constructed right now as we speak. And you find more people in church in Africa than in England. And the religion was brought to Africa by the British. So when we want to criticize this issue of religion linking to slavery, I think religion played a role because the missionaries, they came with the cross in front of them, presenting a different agenda, why the colonial masters were behind with their economic reasons. And the Black Africans and whether the South Americans and the Africans, they were that all ignorant and they couldn't know what was going on. But the understanding was just between the clergymen and the colonial masters. The cross was in front while they were preaching the religious messages letting Africans to be calm, to be humble, while the colonial masters were doing their politics and their interests were being fulfilled. This is the reason why you find the provocation of churches more in Africa nowadays than even schools. So we tend to ask this question: why are churches being constructed in Africa more than schools in Africa? But in England, where the religion started and they brought the religion to us, you cannot even find church. You go to church on Sunday, you will not even find people in churches. So churches are turned into nightclubs. One I saw in Preston here.
Do you know what, Chrysanthus?
Yes.
You got a valid point. Honestly, you got a valid point. It's interesting. And thank you for asking the question. Because when we don't see something, you've experienced it, you're from the Cameroon, so you understand. And again, like you said, we don't see it here. And I think it's one of the things that I thought about when, you know, when they did the COVID, one of the things that really raised my eyebrows when I thought, they closed the churches. How can you close a church? I still couldn't understand. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, can I just correct something?
Yes.
Africa was Christian before Europe. If you read in the Bible, it tells you that there was an Ethiopian eunuch that went from Jerusalem back to Ethiopia. And that was before there was any Christians or anybody who was Christian in Europe. And Ethiopia was Christian before Europe. Ethiopia is a Christian country. It's still a Christian country today. And as I said earlier, you have many traditions that have moved from Nile Valley all over Africa. So why churches are starting is because of spirituality. You'll find that the different kinds of churches than that you have in Britain, but you know they center more about the spiritual aspects of Christianity rather than, you know, the ritual, the rules and the laws that you have in European churches. You have a lot of canon law in the Catholic Church and in the Anglican Church, but you don't have those in the African churches. It's a lot more spiritual.
Yeah, that's something else.
Than European churches. So it's a different style altogether, and it's more to the African culture, which is more spiritual.
Destiny.
Before, thank you, Anthony. Oh gosh, Kwaku, are you still there? Oh yeah.
I'm ready for you when you are.
Kwaku, welcome. And I'm glad you could join us tonight, and I hope that we can connect after this call, because you said some interesting questions. Welcome. Do you want to just introduce yourself, Kwaku? Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I will introduce myself and throw a few things out there for thought. My name is Kwaku. I work around the music industry and African history. So I do things like British Black music, international reggae, and I do a lot of African programs, African history, and also our identity, what we call ourselves and stuff like that. For example, I don't do Black, I do African. But I just want to throw a couple of things. Anthony was talking about Ethiopia. Yes, Ethiopia decreed Christianity as a national religion in the 4th century. We're talking about the 4th century, right? This was around the time when you had the Nicene Creed, that's what today's Turkey. So Ethiopia and Egypt, all these places, there was Christianity there. Now, obviously, I did miss a lot of what went on before, but I think we confuse religion for what I call religiosity. Religiosity is all the rituals around things, and it has, to some extent, no connection with Christians and their relationship with God or Jesus. You have people that are doing things that do not speak to the Bible because they're caught up in whether it's a deacon, it's a bishop, rather than having a relationship with Christ and God. So when you talk about Christians having slaves or chattel slavery or the Christian, yeah, but that wasn't to do with faith. That was to do with an institution that is steeped in religiosity. Now, when you come to the Bible, yeah, there's been slavery in every culture. Is the extent to how it plays out that's important. So in the Bible, the Bible talks about slaves, but it says something about the Jubilee, in case you know where. I think it was every 7 years. You're supposed to free your servants. And also, God reminded us, masters, be on your guard that you have a master that you serve. So in doing so, be conscious about how you treat your slaves or servants. What you're talking about in terms of slavery is chattel slavery, which is a completely different thing in which human beings were reduced to property. So, I mean, sometimes this sort of, when we talk about modern slavery, it has no comparison with the transatlantic trafficking, not trade, trafficking of Africans. And we have to always make that distinction because they try to conflate modern slavery with what went on in the transatlantic period. It has no comparison. Now, I just want to throw a couple of things because obviously I had a chat with the Preston Windrush group. A letter was sent that was supposed as a template to be sent on to MPs to move the Windrush agenda forward. Whilst I agree in principle, I had to pick up a couple of things. I, for example, call what is called the Windrush Scandal the Commonwealth and Windrush Scandal, because by calling it just the Windrush Scandal, it locates it as a Caribbean experience, and it wasn't. The fact that majority of the people are affected from the Caribbean is neither here nor there. If one person dies, you're not going to say, oh, what should I say? 100 people died from the Caribbean, one person died from Nigeria or Ghana. So, can I just finish my point? Thank you very much. So I think when I read that letter and the focus was on the Caribbean, I had to highlight that this issue that we're talking about, and if I call it the big shame, is the greatest scandal that isn't. It ought to be the greatest scandal in recent British history, and it hasn't, despite the coverage by the Guardian. I think we've been quite lenient in the way we portray the scandal.
And that's
anyway,
why I'm glad that you joined. Sorry, Kwaku. That's why I'm glad that you joined tonight, and I'm looking forward to working with you. I haven't introduced you to Anthony yet, but I am so looking forward because, like we said on the email, we have a lot to discuss. Let me just
Could I just finish a point I was making?
Yes, sorry.
So, yeah, okay, right. So I wanted to highlight the fact that the issue at hand is not just a Caribbean experience. We have to bring in the Commonwealth. Whether the numbers are not as significant as what is from the Caribbean is neither here nor there. Now, people have been mentioning the Wendy Williams inquiry. Her remit was specifically looking at the Caribbean, so that was a disservice from the Home Office who scripted that remit. So talking about the Wendy Williams inquiry, it's not quite right in the sense that she was given a tight remit. Look at the Caribbean, although she talked about the Commonwealth, and I'm glad because Anthony, I saw a response. You highlighted some of the things from the report and talked about the Commonwealth. I think we should be mindful that when we talk about the Commonwealth, we're not just talking about countries in the Caribbean because people are so fixated that it's a Caribbean situation. It's, in fact, it's sometimes even wider than Commonwealth. And I think in the Windrush discourse, the Commonwealth should always be part of it. It should be part of it. So I think those are the things I wanted to throw in. It's a conversation that's going ongoing. So I think this is enough for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Those are interesting points, and I did respond to the question, but let me just draw a parallel. We know that in the Nazi death camps there were gypsies, there were homosexuals, there were all kinds of other people. But we don't challenge and say, well, the Holocaust was everybody. We know that, you know, millions of Jews died in those death camps. And why Wendy Williams focused on the Caribbean is not because of her remit. The Home Office, the government gave Wendy Williams a remit to look into what happened with the Home Office, what went wrong. And she investigated all the cases. And what she found was that the serious harms that were committed, where people were deported, put in detention, where they lost their jobs, where they lost their houses, they happened to Caribbean people. Yes, there were other people from the Commonwealth who didn't have the right documentation and are able to go through the Windrush scheme and get their documentations. But in terms of the harm that we see on the television and what people went through, that happened to Caribbean people. That's the distinction. And that's why we focused on the Caribbean people, because we wanted those wrongs to be righted.
Thank you. Just before we go further, I just want to get Joan. We've got a few people that have joined us for the first time. Sakina's got her hand up. Sakina, do you want to raise your point? And then Joan, and then we've got a gentleman called, I've lost him, Cosmo, I think. You're on mute, Sakina.
I'm new to all this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said last year, I heard about the Windrush Scandal back in 2018 for the first time.
Yeah.
And last year on applying for my 13-year-old daughter's passport, and it got declined. I'm like, well, sorry, girls are up. Destiny. Oh, you need to go to bed, love. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Do you want to sort out your
Good negotiation.
Yeah, we'll just go on.
She's not tired yet. Yeah, I'll send you in bedroom. Hang on. Right, you need to go in bedroom.
Let me just go to let me just go to Joan, and then we'll come back to Sakina. Joan. I think she's frozen. Cosmito, would you like to introduce yourself? And did you have a question?
Hi.
Oh, Joan, sorry.
It's all right. I was just waving at you and saying hello and how brilliant it is. That's all.
Okay. Do you want to introduce yourself? Because we have a lot of new people tonight.
Who, me?
Mm.
Oh, hello, everybody. There's some lovely familiar faces. My name's Joan. Hi, Sir Glenroy. Hello, everybody. It's brilliant to hear you all talk. If you don't know already, I'm a documentary maker, but also this is the best part of my week. That's all. And it's brilliant hearing everyone talk. And I met Glenda because I wanted to get Preston COVID response on the news, and I got your brilliant charity on the news because I believe, as you all know, that the narrative is so twisted that more of our stories need to be put on mainstream media, so that people need to be forced to acknowledge that we are an essential part of the DNA of the world's narrative, and especially the British narrative. I'll stop talking now.
Thank you. Thank you. Cosmito, can you hear me? You there? Cosmito? We've got so many comments. So many comments. Dave, welcome. It's a really interesting topic. We have Oh gosh, I'm just trying to go through the chat. Oops. Venetia, are you still there? Is Venetia still here? Okay, Maddie, did you have something to ask? No.
Linda, can I say some one other thing, please?
Yeah.
If Glenroy hasn't already said it, there's that great meeting tomorrow. He's put it in the messages.
Yes.
But yeah, he's probably said it already. But that's a groundbreaking moment for everybody who's interested.
Fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jean, you're on mute. I'll wait till Sakina gets back. Hang on, let me unmute you. Jean? You're on mute. You need to unmute.
Oh, yeah, just wanted to make a quick comment about what the gentleman said about Commonwealth and Wendy Williams's report. If I remember correctly, she actually said the reason why she didn't include the Commonwealth in the report so much was because the people from Canada, Australia, and so forth had all gone back to their country. And it was when the scandal broke loose, it was people from the Caribbean that were the ones that was adversely affected. So she felt there wasn't a great number from the other Commonwealth countries that needed to be included in that report. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. Nicola?
Hiya.
Hiya, Nicola.
I just wanted to say, Anthony, I loved your presentation. It's fantastic, a bit of history there. Now I'm 45, and one of the reasons I came on here tonight was because I've been tracing my family tree in Jamaica back for the last 20 plus years. Wow. I've got a file like that thick. I found books that have written about my family. It's quite a popular name in Jamaica, my name. My family were part of Woodside, and I found so many reference documents. And what I wanted to say was, I went back so far as my family had slaves.
Yes.
And my family were slaves. Yeah. And my family fought for the rights for their mulatto children. And all these things I found out about my history. And I just wonder how many people have gone that far back and did have slave owners as ancestors and slaves, like I found when I've gone back to 1700, 1800. Do you know what I mean? I've got Scots Hall Guards in my history and my ancestors from Jamaica. It's mind blowing. I have to rest for a couple of years and then go back to it. Do you know what I mean? That's just what I want to say.
Thank you. Oh no, thank you, Nicola. You're welcome.
That's fantastic.
Actually, did you respond? And then Marie wants to say something.
That's great when you go back. My family, my father comes from St. Anne, and he is from Brownstown, and there was a slave master called Hamilton Brown, and I was thinking, he could be the person that owned my father's ancestors. So I was thinking one day, if I can actually go back through the records and find out if he actually owned my father's ancestor, then he would have been paid compensation. And so I'll be saying to the British government, well, I'm entitled to inherit what my ancestor should have been paid. Can I have it now, please? Put in a claim. So I'm looking forward to that. So keep tracing and keep recording your family history, because if I succeed, then you can come and put in your claim as well.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. Marie, do you want to unmute yourself?
Glenda, I didn't have anything to say. I've just been listening.
All right, sorry, I thought you was waving.
No, not at all.
Okay. Sakina, are you ready for your question? No, no, she's not ready. She's still sorting out her children. Okay, we've got a lot, everybody loves your presentation, Anthony. Will they be able to get that?
They can have the slides, but there's not very much to it, really. I'm going to put something in this chat about slave rebellions, because I really think people don't realize how many rebellions there were. They got this idea somehow that slaves were just docile creatures, you know, going to church every Sunday. Yeah, that happened, but every so often there were massive rebellions and people were pretty violent. And you know, you don't get that sort of violence from people who are brainwashed by Christianity. You get that from people who realize that what they've read or what they've been taught is that, you know, everybody's created, and you know, nobody should be enslaving somebody else, and that's what they were fighting against. Marcus Garvey, Nelson Mandela. You go right through history, even in modern history, you always find that it's the people that go and read the Bible that then realize, hang on a minute, and start rebelling. In South America, in Latin America, when in the 80s and 90s, there was a theology called liberation theology, and that was through priests saying that, you know, how people were being oppressed by the governments, you know, was against the Christian teaching. So it's always been there. And what people had to do in some places was to get the Bible and edit those bits out and try to teach them something else. But even then, people still rebelled. So it's a myth.
Thank you.
Can I ask
We've
a quick
got
question?
Martin. Can Martin, before yourself, Glenroe, just got
Okay.
Martin, and then you. And if any, again, I'm just going to ask you, at the bottom of your screen, there is a reaction. If you put up your hand to wave, and then I can reach you, and then I can bring you all in. Okay, Martin, and then Glenroe.
First of all, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Martin. Introduce yourself before you ask your question.
Okay. I'm from London, born in Jamaica. But I'm also a local councillor. I've been in meetings all day, but I'm here regardless.
No, glad you came. You said you were going to make it, and you made it.
Yeah. Really, really good. I say again, I might have to emigrate to Preston. We don't have these kind of debates here in London. But I wanted to really just follow on what Anthony said, and Anthony's quite right, that the story of the enslavement of my ancestors is told, of course, through the prism of the intellectuals from Cambridge, Oxford, and all the usual universities that control the teaching of history to the ordinary man and woman in this country. And of course, it is heavily slanted and totally misrepresents the facts. And I think it's really important, because even we fall into that trap of referring to our own ancestors, our own flesh and bloods, as slaves. And I know that my grandfather, and I'm sure his father and mother, would have crinkled and said, "Oh, we were never slaves. We were brutalized. We were absolutely brutalized. We were suppressed. They used the most heinous means to suppress us continuously. That's what they did. We were enslaved. Yeah, it was a form of purgatory we all experienced for whole lifetimes. That's what was happening. But there was continuous rebellions, and it's those rebellions that were never, which are not recorded here in Britain. And some of us, even in my own family lines, forget about our own history. We don't need someone from Oxford or Cambridge to tell you about our history. You just need to talk to your great-grandmothers and fathers, and they will tell you. Remember, in my father's lifetime, an African person could not own capital or property in Jamaica. In my father's lifetime. Okay? In other words, despite the fact that we'd achieved a degree of emancipation, the control of the economics of the country, Jamaica in this case, was still rested with London. So denying us the control of capital ensured then that our progression, social progression, political progression was slowed down. And I say all that because it's important, and as you listen to Anthony and his explanation as to what happened during those days, you know, he's of course pointed to the usual names which are usually get into the books. But in my own family line, I've got ancestors by the name, in fact, of Anthony. In fact, at least one of them is Anthony, okay, who was a great soldier of his time in my family line. Okay? And we remember people like him. We remember Rebecca, another one in our family lines. And we remember them because they made sacrifices. Okay? And they made sacrifices either by destroying the equipment, burning the crops, and killing wherever they could those who sought to oppress us. Okay? But of course, those stories are not told in the books here. Okay? Why is it so important that they are told now? So that the children today, okay, are able to see themselves in the true context, that we were never serfs, we were never subservient. Okay? It was always continuous oppression. It's important for the average English man and woman, those on average incomes, you know, who can barely live, okay, to know the truth about the aristocracy, those who owned land, those who were allowed to vote. Because, you know, remember, it's only just under 100 years ago, women couldn't vote here, you know, you remember, yeah? Just under 150 years ago, it was those who owned land that could vote. The others could not vote, you couldn't vote, do you see? So the changes that have occurred have only occurred because of continuous rebellions, both by my own ancestors, and I have to tell you, Anthony, and it's important for you as well, that my ancestors would have referred to themselves as either Jamaican or they would remember where we came from, the motherland. Now, okay, now it's important because in my own line, we have a language which is very close to Twi in Ghana, very, very close, very, very close to it. And in fact, I have ancestors who could read and write, but the enslavers were unaware they could read and write. Yeah. And whilst I'm going to agree with Anthony that religion is an opium, and it can be both to use to manipulate those who seek to oppress and also liberate the oppressors. Okay, it was not religion that was the greatest motivator for our continuous resistance. It was simply our dignity as human beings. We were never meant to be oppressed, okay? Which is why we always made sure that those who sought to oppress paid a heavy price. Britain recognized that with each passing decade, Britain was not actually becoming richer. It was actually spending far more money on military, on the military, far more money on exporting items from the Caribbean and the Americas to Britain. With each successive decade that passed, because of the resistance of local peoples, made it more expensive. So for good, sound economic reasons, it was a sensible step to give those people a degree of freedom. I say degree, because of course, if you don't control the economy, I don't believe that's freedom anyway, but if you had absolutely nothing, if you're oppressed to the point of death with each successive generation, even to get the opportunity to have some political control was a degree of liberation. Now we're at the phase where it's now economic control. That is the big driver. That is where much of the effort is being focused, which is why I'm a member of the Global African Congress, of which Glenroy is a member, and I believe Quaker, who's here, may also be a member, and why that's an important development in the history of Africans worldwide, and why it will continue to be a leading light in promoting the restitution for that which was taken away. Restitution, both political, social, and economic restitution, is now the next step. And I think someone said it earlier on, I think Joan said it, that we remain an integral part of the DNA of world civilization and British civilization, and therefore we have a damn right to demand reparations, absolutely. And there's no backing off on this, we're going forward. Absolutely, we have a damn right for it. So if the Church of England, with all these hundred, if not thousands of churches across Britain, benefited from the enslavement of and the blood of my ancestors, they absolutely shall pay reparations. If the Times top 100 companies, British companies, benefited from the blood and sweat of my ancestors, they absolutely will pay reparations. And any other institution that will engage in such behaviour, they will absolutely pay just reparations for what they've done. And the consequence, of course, is to underdevelop, to some extent, my ancestral homeland of Africa. But even that will be corrected. Because if there's anything I'm absolutely certain, it's in my DNA, and you can detect it in the DNA of many of us here, that we are never, ever going to give up for that which is rightfully ours.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you for that, Martin.
Wow.
That's
You know,
brilliant.
Martin,
Yeah.
you enlighten me every week, and I'm sure me and Anthony are going to be talking, and Sakina and everybody. We're going to be talking. Thank you very much. A lot's been said in the group. Let me just go to Glenroy and then G.
1 second. By underlining what I've said, you've made me remember something else. That when
1 second.
When the enslaved were rebelling and the slave masters had to be more and more cruel, and all the devices that they used to make to control them, these were documented. And if we look up somebody called Oluda Equiano and look at what he wrote, he was very instrumental here in Britain in motivating the abolitionists by writing about what the slaves were doing, what the slaves were fighting for, and giving it to people like Thomas Clarkson, who then went around giving sermons. He gave a sermon in 1787 at Manchester Cathedral, and that then mobilized the abolitionists to stand in solidarity with the enslaved people. People say that you know, slavery was acceptable, it was lawful, but when the ordinary people heard what was going on from these stories, they rose up and said, no, it has to stop, it has to stop. And that was the thing that got, you know, the bill passed through Parliament. It was the slaves rebelling and fighting. People then, the slave master had to be more cruel. Then people got to hear about it. That's what ended slavery. The twin action between the ordinary people in England and the enslaved fighting. It wasn't just politicians saying, oh, I've got a good idea today.
I'll make one request, Anthony. Can I make one request of you, Anthony? And enough respect to you, first of all. Can I make one request? Because I said our ancestors would be cringing, okay? We could never describe the enslavers as masters. I think it's really important. They are never our masters. And secondly, as I said, I had the privilege, when I was quite young, to meet my great grandfather, who lived a very long time. Okay, a remarkable, charismatic, even age 100, whatever he was. He would never describe himself ever, because he's old enough, of course, as a slave. Okay, really important. These are sort of psychologically important milestones for us as part of our psychological liberation to overcome. They were never masters, okay? They were absolute brutal enslavers who had no regard for life, and we would never describe ourselves as a slave, a supine human being. It was always under duress. Okay, really important, always under duress. Never accept that title. It was never our title. We are of African heritage, and we've got to announce that as a fact, and thereby give power to the pride and the history that we have as part of the world civilization. Praise be.
Thank you for that. Just one more quick point. Abraham Lincoln, in the American Civil War, when the cotton was being needed to be sent to Manchester and the Northwest for the cotton mills, people here refused to take the cotton, and they lost their jobs, they suffered, but they wouldn't take it because they knew that in taking the cotton they'd be supporting the South. So people knew what was wrong and what was right, and people stood up and stood with the people who were being enslaved and oppressed here in England. They didn't just think, oh, you know, it's lawful, so therefore it's fine. No, they knew wrong from right.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got a lot of points. Glenroy is next.
Thanks very much, comrade. Listen, let's just be very clear. I don't want to be chasing a vision that's not being put forward. I understand that the emphasis...
Sorry, Glenroy, there's some interference somewhere. I can't...
Yeah, it's probably me. I've got somebody working on the house, so there's television going as well. I want to be very clear, Anthony, because it goes to the core of my question that I will ask later on, and was the reason I put my hand up. I am getting the clear impression that what we're being told is that religious involvement, indeed religious endorsement by enslaved Africans was somehow a motivation for rebellion. Now, I completely reject that. I believe that if anything, the opportunity that the religion offer was taken up by a number of people because it resources. You rightly said, it gave people the chance to travel around the country and recruit other people. So they were using it as a tool. It wasn't because they had embraced this concept. So I really am confused about whether we are saying being religious, being in a religious context, improve your situation. Because what Solly was saying earlier on is giving you the example, which was a legal event about a child being freed, if that's the word, during the time when so many of our people and the people around him was being enslaved, simply because he had managed to run away from a religious concept. And they had to make it clear that once he was breathing the air of England, he had to be free. If it's the same case, Solly, I don't know if it's another one, but that wasn't because of religious doctrine. It was a simple legal interpretation that some people wanted to say, here, if you're in the UK, you know, you can't be enslaved, which was a lie, obviously, because they had loads of people who were being enslaved in various parts of the country during that time. But I am struggling with this concept that somehow religious leaders, religion is the backbone of a number of revolutionary leaders, because you're right, it's the Africans who ended enslavement. You know, I've never thought it was Wilberforce or any of those other people. There may have been help. And certainly the women that were boycotting sugar and, as you say, opposed the Civil War, did a lot of great work in Liverpool, preventing them getting their warships and so on, which Liverpool was supporting the South, the enslavers. You know, that's a history. That's a history. And there were people in Liverpool who were opposing that, etc., etc. But my deep concern is, I don't think you should offer a throwaway line that tried to lead us to believe that the religious backbone of the rebellions and all the rebellions, and you're right, there were many rebellions, were so integral to religious belief. And, you know, for me, let me finish. Because my real question is, tell me what proportion of all of those rebellion you could say were because of people's involvement in religion. Because everyone who's following those leaders were not necessarily caught up in that religion. They were there waiting at any opportunity to rebel against the horrible situation it is. So I'm, you know, and you use a phrase that I have to tell you, it did my head in, about a good enslaver. I know you didn't say it, Martin is correct, you used another term, I'm not using it, but that they were good enslavers. And somehow people were more, everyone opposed to it. Malcolm speak about house Negro and field Negro, but I think even the house, so-called house Negro who was comfortable, still wanted to get away. He just needed another motivation. So for me, I am at this point rejecting your idea that the majority of rebellions or majority of leaders within rebellion were from the religious belief. And I would say a majority of them were using the religion as their tool for their liberation. There's a few other things I want to say, but I've tried to keep as much out of it so others can speak.
Absolutely amazing. Before Anthony speaks, we've got a lot of people. Can I ask, because as we get late, and you know what happens, and those who've not been here before, as we wind down the night, we will be going around the room and asking everybody just what they've got from tonight. As quick as you can, a comment, because it is getting late. We could talk all night. There will be a second part in 2 weeks. We will be continuing this topic. Again, like I said, we really did think, and I did, about the Windrush and the church. It had to be brought to the forehead. But as we go around, Anthony, do you want to respond to Glenroy?
Just quickly. I'll give you 3 examples, Glenroy. And before you reject what I say, have a little look at these people. Nat Turner, the biggest rebellion in the US, he personified himself as Moses. He'd read in the Bible, he was a lay preacher, and he personified himself as Moses, a Christian. Toussaint Louverture, the greatest slave rebellion in history, the only ever slave rebellion in history. Again, he was a reader of the Bible, okay? Sam Sharp, Jamaica, again, he was a reader. And you can go through the list. Now, I'm not saying that everyone was a Christian. I never said that. I said that many of them practiced their own African spirituality and they couldn't have been Christians. But the idea that Christianity was something that held people as slaves, I say, is bogus because of these examples.
Okay, thank you. If you can all hold your thought, we're going to go and say, as we end up, do not go if you haven't said something tonight. Okay, so I just want to reach out. Michael, are you there, please? Michael Can you hear us? Michael, oh, you're off mute. Michael, good evening. Welcome to your first Windrush Conference Free Talk.
Good evening, Glenda. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening and welcome. We always go around just before we closed for the evening, and because there's so many people, we really want to get a little bit of feedback. Hope you've enjoyed this evening, got something, and just briefly just share who you are, where you've come from, and what you got from tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I'm also a Prestonian, Jamaican descent, and I've really enjoyed tonight. I was fortunate to watch one of your previous forum meetings, and I enjoyed that, and wanted to have the opportunity of listening in this evening. Thoroughly enjoyed it, the debate, the history. It's invigorated me once again to look more into our history. So thank you, and I look forward to maybe joining you again next week.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you very much, Michael. Who else was there? Cosmito. Good evening. Welcome. Cosmito, can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to shoot over to Daniel. Daniel, good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Daniel. Did you get to listen to most of tonight? Just a little bit of feedback before we...
I did, yes, and again, it was amazing. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, everybody who participated. I thought it was amazing. I think the history is very informative, and I think everybody's viewpoint is very informative, and it does open your eyes to everything, you know, that's going on, really, and you know, it's shocking as well, really, of what's happened.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you have any questions, Daniel?
I don't at the moment, but I'd like to grab the slides off Anthony, if possible.
Say that again.
I'd like to grab the slides off Anthony, if possible.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure we'll be able to get that to you. All right, thank you very much, and I hope we see you next week as well. Okay, stay on, don't go yet, because you missed the end with Sam. You'll miss the end with Sam. Anna, Anna, you all right, sweet?
I'm all right, thanks.
Fantastic. Brilliant to see you tonight. Did you get anything tonight? You enjoy it?
Yep, fascinating as ever.
Wonderful. Introduce yourself briefly, what you got from it, any questions, as quickly as you can.
Oh, you're all right. I'm just listening tonight.
All right, that was short. Anna's usually a talker.
No.
All right, brilliant. Thank you. Sister G's in the house. Glenda.
Hey, hi everyone.
Hi,
I'm just listening in today. I haven't got much to say, but it was interesting what I did catch, and I'm sorry I'm so late, Glenda.
No, it's okay. I know you're busy. I know you're busy there in London.
Yeah.
Do you want to quickly just introduce yourself, because we've got a lot of new people tonight, and just introduce yourself briefly, Glenda.
I'm Glenda Caesar. I'm a Windrush survivor and campaigner. That's
fabulous.
It.
Thank you. Lovely to see you. Love you a lot.
Thank you.
Martin, what did you get tonight?
Me? You talking to me?
You.
Well, as I said, I'm definitely going to emigrate to Preston. You know, yeah, I definitely will. I think the real benefit of the dialogue such as this is that you know, we are bridging those gaps. You know, because I know in my own ward here in London that when you speak to ordinary English, Welsh, Scotch people about their lives and their experiences, you find that they're no different to mine. And they're astonished by that as well, I have to say. And what we then go on to discover that we have far more in common than what's different, you know, and that's the advantage of dialogues such as this, you know, and what tends to happen as a result of dialogues such as this is that we reverberate, we affect other people, you be exposed to others, and you affect other people, and that those positive vibes, that could use our spiritual term, affects others, and it will affect society. So we need more places, we need more Prestons in every town and village across Britain. And can you imagine if this was happening in every town and village across Britain? Within a year, Britain would be a transformed society. Well done, Preston. Well, Preston.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Nigel. Nigel, hi.
Hello, how you doing?
Hi, sweet. You all right?
I'm not so bad, not so bad, not so bad.
I know you've been in and out.
Yeah, but I was kind of interested in the kind of high court debate between Glenroy and Anthony in terms of the peculiarities of the church and the involvement of the church with how people conducted themselves back those 400 years and such. So interesting conversation. Not going to decide who I'm sided with, because obviously it's a personal thing. So keep up those debates. And, you know, in terms of what the last speaker said of, you know, Preston setting the scene for discussions and, you know, having the chance for people to kind of have a debate, I'd be interested to hear some other person's views. So thank you very much, Linda.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And again, I'm going to reiterate, we will be continuing this debate, Windrush and church history, in 2 weeks' time. Hopefully we've got the lovely Clive Foster and Anthony, and I'm sure we're going to have
in the chat.
and I'm sure, yeah, we're going to have some others as well. Chrysanthus.
Yes.
Yes. I can't see you. I know. Is this your second time, Chrysanthus?
Yes. Is it second time?
Yes, I thought so.
Yes, I just want to say I'm happy.
Did you come to the public meeting last year in Preston?
Yes.
And don't you live near me?
Yes, I live near you. No, now I live on Oxford Street. I left there. I was in the center.
That's right.
Yeah.
South.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
I'm very much delighted to be part of this today. I've learned so much about the Windrush again as I learned the first day, and it has been more elaborate today than how I got it the first day. And I'll be happy if the Windrush could extend to other areas, like sensitizing the people in the United Kingdom about the history of this country, how this country went to other countries and exploited the other countries and colonized the other countries. It would be a good thing, because if all the citizens of the United Kingdom are aware of their history, are aware of their activities around the world, I believe it will give them a more humble position to treat people like the Windrush Generation positively, and any other foreigner that is coming to this country.
Thank you. And I hope you come back.
I'll always come back. I wanted to end that question about churches because, you know, the rate at which the churches that came in Africa to come and introduce religion in Africa, the way they are closing down in the UK here, and they are instead increasing in Africa. Africans used to think that it was because the mission behind the religion in Africa was accomplished. That's why they are now closing their own churches here. That's what I wanted to bring at the end when you stopped me.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. But thank you.
I'm sorry.
The discussion hasn't changed. So we will be continuing.
All right. Okay. Then if we can go beyond things like slavery, because slavery has since ended. We are trying now to make a way that they can try to compensate, especially like the Windrush generation. And we must not go back to think about what has happened. We have our future and live a better life now. And we look into the ways that most of the Western countries are exploiting other African countries, like signing some kind of intimidating contracts with the African government, because they are still intimidated by the West. And you see, that's most of the reason why most of the African countries are so weak economically. And you find lots of immigration from other peoples coming, leaving Africa and coming to Europe. We can stop if the West is fairer in the economic agenda in Africa and all over the world.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to go to Joan.
I love the. Yes, epic. I love it when you talk about Preston, because no, it's only because my mum only told me a few months ago that she landed in Preston. So I find it very touching, even though I've never been to Preston. She talks about Preston and how she landed. But the only thing I wanted to say, which I feel thoroughly full up and stimulated by the history debates, because I don't know enough about my history. But every time we talk about history, we immediately have to connect it with the great, what I call the Great British Amnesia, this obsession with completely ignoring the history and realizing it's part of our present debate. You all know that, of course, but I love using the term Great British Amnesia, because I think that's a pandemic in this country, that we have all the facts, all the information is there, but a great majority of people actively choose to ignore it. So the things that happen to our community and our family continue because of this, what I call amnesia. I'm probably not making much sense.
No, you do.
But I thoroughly enjoy meeting everybody here and hearing the discussions, and especially the history as well, and the chat show between Anthony and Glenroy and Martin.
Fantastic, yeah. Thank you. Sakina. You're on mute. Unmute, sweet.
Hi.
Hi.
Right, what's happening here?
What did you get from tonight? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah. Very interesting.
Okay. And any questions for Anthony or anyone?
Well, like I said before, I didn't know nothing. I heard about it in a couple of years ago. Didn't think it applied to me. Then last year, when I had the problem with Lynette's passport, that's when it hit me.
Yeah, and you put a comment in that your ancestors came from India.
Yeah.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 1866.
1866, yeah.
And the ship ran around what?
Ran aground in Barbados.
Oh, they hung around in Barbados and then took them to St. Vincent.
Yeah, Calder Village.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of research, haven't you, into your family history, to your ancestors?
Oh, well, I've got family on here. There's thousands of us. I'm one of the biggest families going.
All right. Well, thank you. And it's great to see you join us tonight. All right. And I hope you can join us again next week. All right.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Fantastic. Thank you. Suli.
Hello.
Hi, my dear. What did you get from tonight? We knew it was going to be a lovely debate.
Well, it's very interesting. It's good to see so many different approaches to the historical elements that religion has. I have a very contradictory kind of view on that. And I try to base more on, at the moment, I'm looking a lot of history, and obviously things happen in the past, and then it needs to be going forward, in a more civilized word, more informed word. Indeed, Glenroy, that history about the boy, I like when you mentioned he didn't escape. He just went for his freedom because this is what was meant to be. And I was quite shocked when I found out about the clergyman being deeply involved and responsible as well for being part of the slavery system and taking advantage of it. So I found out this quite recently, but we have the several histories about the Christian Catholic Church as well, the Crusades, and then so many other, history tells us a lot of bad things, how religion and power, see what happens to Henry VII when he changed because he wants to marry a woman. So, and then religion was completely in favor of that kind of, so religion, the religion has this really, really dark side of it. And then you have the Joanna d'Arc as well, woman persecuted, branded as witches. So there are various sides of the history, and then the big responsibility and accountability that has to be attributed to Christianity. And then every kind of oppression could be enslavement, it could be systems of power, and then religions played a massive role in that. And then I think that shouldn't be brushed under the carpet. It should be taught about it. They've made mistakes. Obviously, we have really, really great leadership in religions, representative in religion, and in different types of religion. I'm really, really keen to listen to all different types of religion. And I know Anthony mentioned about the Bible when Chris Santos interjected about the origins of Christianity brought by the Europeans to Africa. But I would like to hear more academic based rather than the Bible, as history has to be told as well by historians, and then just to use the Bible as a reference, I think it's not credible enough, especially when we live in a multi-religion, ecumenic kind of world, that some people would not use that as a credible source. But I think what's really good, I really enjoy the mention about the Orishas. I'm a massive fan of the Orishas. It's part of the Brazilian culture. I have my Oshun here, which is my Orisha. I got that from Salvador.
So it's still going.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can see good parts of all religions. All religions are I'm very pro a they call ecumenism, isn't it? When you believe and you want to take the best of all religions. So this is Oshumare, is my Orisha. Mm-hmm. So and then Oshun was the one you presented there. Ogun, I think it's Ogun, isn't it?
It was Shango.
Oh, Shango, yes, mm-hmm. Shango. So and then yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's really interesting. It's really good. Fantastic presentation, Anthony. And yeah, you need to continue talking about a lot of other elements of that.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you. Jean. I will get to everybody. That's why we start early. Yeah, that's why we start early. We'll get to them. So don't go if you don't get to say anything. All right. Jean, how you doing? What do you think? Any questions, comments?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, just a quick comment. thought the presentation by Anthony was very interesting, and I quite liked Gilroy's intervention, and also Martin. I thought, because I must admit I need to learn more about my history. I'm very English because I came here very young and nobody taught me at school, and I've learned more about my history in this lockdown than ever. But for the next time, could someone just do a little research on out of many came one? Because I've heard various accounts of how that phase came about.
Oh gosh. Oh,
But
the
that's for another time.
Okay, the Jamaican emblem.
Yeah.
So it was
Okay.
designed by a bishop.
But wasn't it, well, I've heard quickly then that it was all the rebellious slaves actually that was shipped off to Jamaica, why they then, because they were from Brazil and all over the place, that were, as I said, shipped off to Jamaica because no one could control them.
Yeah.
And that's where the phrase came from, they reckon, out of many came one, because they were from all different parts of the world, if you like.
Yes.
Many
Yeah.
one people.
Yes.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you. We will take that up next time.
Yeah.
Michael. Wow. Thank you for staying so long. And sometimes these can go on till 12, 1 o'clock. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah. When it ends, usually we come back. Some of us come back.
Oh, Lord. Bring my bed with me next time then.
Michael, how'd you find tonight? Glad you're still here. Are you still on mute? Sorry. Hang on, let me see. I've unmuted you.
Yeah, I think tonight was even better than last week. Yeah. I was very impressed with Anthony again, and Martin. This is a joke, Martin. Don't take it the wrong way. I bet the other councillors don't get a word in edgeways. Oh, very good, very good. I'd like to find more about this enslaved black boy that escaped from the clergyman in Heysham. Where would I find the source for that?
I'll put the link in here.
Yes,
the database is really interesting. I'll put the link in there. It's in there, the history. Actually, I sent to Glenda the original
advert,
the original, announcement on the classifieds on the London Chronicle St. James one. But this book as well is I've just been finishing reading. It's about the I found the information here, and was written by 2 academics from UCLan. The artwork is from the Professor Lubania Hemit, and the history, the article the text is by Professor Alan Rice. He lives in Lancaster, and also Professor,
he was meant to join tonight. He couldn't make it tonight.
Yeah, but he said I mentioned about the group, and then we were talking on Friday. So
yeah,
he's arranging. It's going to be in the Maritime Museum. This work is going to be an exhibition there soon. I'm gonna find out about dates and then all the period that it's going to run. But they will sell the books in there as well. So this one I was actually signed by Lubania. So, and I had a chat about it as well. So she did all the painting in the China, special, really, really beautiful. And it's a memorial book. Zong was the name of the slave. There are many other stories, not only about the boy, but it's about the ships, and then transporting the human cargo.
Yeah, you're gonna have to put it in the link. Put the link in the group for the book. And hopefully we're gonna have Lubina on one of our conferences. As we wrap up, because everybody's going, Nicola, thank you, Suli. Nicola, how did you find tonight? I hope you come next week.
Hi.
Hi,
Yeah,
Sue.
very interesting. I came with an open mind because I don't actually talk to many people about what my interests are, which is my Jamaican side. So it's been very interesting to hear people's perspectives on the slave trade and also the Christianity theme, because I am in no way, I don't follow any religion. I've got no, I don't even read anything about the history of the religion in Jamaica. It's just more family based. So it was interesting, and I will read up a bit on that this week because I've got a lot of questions to ask and opinions to seek after hearing the bit of a debate. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Well, you've kept me up till 11:15. I've actually laid in my bed half dressed.
Oh, bless you. No,
my dog's not up bed. I was thinking, what's she doing here? But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, very informative. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave Williams, thank you for coming on Silver Afro TV. Dave, you're mute. You need to unmute.
Absolutely brilliant. I did come on late. You all right?
Yes, we're good.
You all right, everybody? I did come on late, but absolutely brilliant. I noticed the new faces. Very interesting. Anthony, yes. Martin, yes. Glenroy, yes. Very hard debating. It's good to watch.
Thank you.
It's good to watch. It's good to watch somebody else for a change.
Thank you, Dave. Jen.
Hi, I've things going round in my head. I feel like a firework. Like I feel like I've just been moved to a different place because I'm just so excited about everything that I'm learning this week. I've read a lot about reparations, and it was really good that Anthony went into more details about it. I feel like as I'm no longer a teacher. I used to be a teacher in a school in East London, and many of the kids were from very different backgrounds, and they loved talking about their backgrounds and where they were from. And I think I want to know like how to take this forward and how to. I'm really pleased that Glenroy sent. That tomorrow actually Glenroy's organising this big Zoom meeting from tomorrow afternoon, and there are loads of amazing speakers. I think he put information about it.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to listen to Abu Akil and Jacqueline McKenzie, a lawyer, I think what I'm really interested in knowing more about is what reparations means individually for every person, and I think I'd really like to see some kind of like very, very clear, focused demands that aren't too abstract for people to understand. I understand a little bit because I've been reading and I've been attending like 8 or 9 or 10 of these meetings. But at the beginning, I was still trying to understand what is reparations, and I think it's really complicated for people that don't take an interest in the Windrush generation and in Black history to have an idea, because it's such an abstract concept for people that aren't interested in Black history. So that's why I think, from the perspective of being a white person whose history, I don't think connects to the slave trade and to racism and to colonization, I don't think, then I think it would be really good to have it in a really conceptual way. And I would love to be part. As a primary school teacher, I'm really like, people think it's really annoying that I ask, you know, questions. My questions are always to try and understand from a kind of child's perspective, because I think, like, if kids can understand it, then we can all understand it. And so for me, I want to maybe from tomorrow, like this long meeting tomorrow, I'm hoping to kind of link up with somebody that can help me try and get this message of reparations to the layperson, if it makes sense. Just a really simplified, because I don't think people quite understand. I don't think, without attending these meetings, I wouldn't understand what compensation is, or what rehabilitation is, or and it's only from listening to this, what Anthony said, and what Swelly's mentioned, and what Martin's mentioned, and what Joan Jones said about what the reparations are for. Like, it's for all the you know, for all the crimes against humanity that we don't learn about in the British education system. And I think by having these meetings and these discussions, we're going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think we can keep on going deeper. But I think also we need to be branching out to people that don't know. And I kind of want to know, like, how to do it. And I think it's really important that as a group we do it. You know, because the government in the next couple of months, there has been a lot of pressure on the government to talk about slavery in the curriculum, and, you know, and we can all say it's very tokenistic, but teachers need to understand and need to be able to reflect, and so I need to have the time to be able to do it. And I think, you know, like Martin said a few weeks ago, more white people need to come to these meetings, and it's great to see more people of different backgrounds coming to these meetings, and it's on your territory. It's not white people saying, right, let's talk about slavery, because it's from a different perspective. So anyone that can kind of help me get this understanding of Black history to the layperson, and help me kind of figure out how to get this kind of, I don't know if it's like a sock and it's,
I think,
turn it inside out with everybody else, then I'd be really looking forward. And I think that's what I want to do. I want to try and make it more simplified to the layperson.
Jen,
So any ideas you have, please tell me.
You're welcome, and thank you for your comments. But Jen, trust me, we've been working for I don't know how many weeks. You are doing an amazing job already. Yeah, you just keep doing what you're doing, and I think Anthony will back me when I say this. You're amazing. So I think you get it. I think for you to share what you already gained is absolutely amazing. So again, like I said to Fiona the other week, and everybody else, you do an amazing job.
You are. You're gonna move car.
Who am I looking for? Cosmito, can you hear us? Kwaku?
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for.
I can't hear you too well.
Oh, okay. I'm fine. Thanks for the invite, and I'm sure if I receive them subsequently and time allows, I will. So I'll just touch on a couple of things. First of all, I'm mindful of the broad sweep in talking about Christianity or religion in Africa. Quite frankly, I don't think Africa or Africans are any more spiritual than anyone. We might be expressive in the way we do our religions, but to me, spirituality means having a communication with God and communicating that to your fellow man. So when you sit in Accra, Ghana, and you have churches that are sprung up everywhere, you have churches in compounds, so they're making noises up to praising God, up to late in the evening without care for the neighbors. Not everyone's a Christian, or even as a Christian, it can be irritating when people are worshiping in such a noisy thing. Worse still, you have people who are preaching to a neighborhood from 5 in the morning. So we have all these things. But I think the other thing I want to bring to your understanding is that you have to be in Africa to understand how Christianity works, especially what I call the modern Christians. Most of their leaders are pop stars. You see the billboards, and Jesus is not mentioned anywhere. It's big images of the leaders. So they become the entities in which people are literally worshiping, and we're still. Tithes are important, but I tell you, a lot of our modern churches are businesses in which people are forced to tithe, and we have our pastors or leaders of churches in big cars, big homes, and their congregation are living abject poverty. What kind of Christianity is that? It is a business for most of them, so I want to highlight that. Now, looking at the charts, I noticed someone asked that, and they said stolen wealth rather than Commonwealth, but I will use Commonwealth for now, where any non-Caribbeans illegal in terms of I'll say Commonwealth and Windrush Scandal. I'll just say that as surprising as it may be, there were some Europeans, whether Canadians or Australians, who were caught up in this situation. So although most Europeans will have patrols that come back to Britain, so they were not caught up in the Windrush situation. Some Europeans, and I know people from Australia who were caught up in that, so let's just be mindful of that. Now I'll come to Martin. I'm sure Martin is still around, since I can make a point. First of all, Martin, I think the COVID pandemic, you can look at it, there's a positive side to it. We should take agency. So I don't ascribe, as much as these guys are doing great things in Preston, I would say, Martin, you should take agency. I know you do your radio programs on Galaxy Afiwi, and organize some of these things yourselves. Let's not wait for people to be doing things. It's not like the old days where you go have a building and pay for that. A Zoom meeting, Martin. So I'm saying, don't look to Preston. You should take it on board and practice what you're preaching. You want to see this in different parts? Start with South London or whatever, and do it yourself, and people like us will come. Last, back to Martin. He talked about language, and I applaud him. Language is very, very important. It speaks to how we have this discourse. So in the chat, I'll put a couple of things. I've got a blog called The African or Black Question, TAOBQ. So I've got a post that talks to terminologies. So you can have a look, it's in the chat. We've also got something called the TAOBQ Manifesto that talks to African identity and heritage. And at the end of the day, it's to do with language. And lastly, I'm sure you're aware, but I want to reiterate, we are in the middle of what's supposed to be ITPA, International Decade for People of African Descent. This is a UN initiative in which I say, although member states, which are countries like the UK, are supposed to do things, they don't, but we should rely on them. Our civil society organizations, we've got GACUC, for example, we've got something called ITPA Coalition. We as Africans should take agency and use this, because you have to read that document. ITPA, we can use it to move forward, especially in this day of African Lives Matter or Black Lives Matter. We can make our arguments using that as a bedrock to moving for racial justice. So I think that's enough for one evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwaku. Thank you very much. Glenroy, have you said?
That's amazing. 1700.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just saying something quickly. Is Jean still here? Is she gone?
No, Jean's gone, I think.
Has gone. Just building on what Kwaku has raised, because what I was putting in the chat is the fact that this commission, and you know, I've not read it, I'm just surmising what I hear, appear to be motivated by what has been clearly identified as an illegal act by the British government. I hope it does also identify the deliberate act of destroying paperwork for people who came to this country. But I wonder whether the failure to look at other parts of the stolen wealth, such as Nigeria, because I'm aware that there are many deportations to Nigeria. But what happens is it was clearly recognized that an injustice, or accepted, perhaps recognized is another matter, because I think it's very much recognized by the government of all these illegal activity. So I think that what has happened, and possibly why this young lady's investigation did not look in the wider context, is because it was designated that what happened to the Windrush, so-called Windrush Generation, was an illegal act. But all those other people were being designated as economic migrant, illegal migrant, etc., etc. So I suspect a governmental led investigation will not be too keen to actually address the fact that people you have decided was illegal, the people who you wanted to catch by the hostile environment and did catch them and did deport them. Oh, but those ones that were wrongly done, we've got to say that that was wrong. So I think, and I as I said, not ready, I'm surmising that what may have happened, because we do know that other parts of the stolen wealth had people deported there. The emphasis on the Caribbean is to create a narrative that excludes those people. And as far as I'm concerned, no one is illegal. No one should really not have the right to go wherever they are. Many of us with our brown or whatever it's going to become in the future, so-called British passport, will be doing these things. I don't deny that to anyone in any part of the globe. Look forward to the 2 or was it 3 million people from Hong Kong coming. You see how the right wing will respond to that.
Fabulous, thank you. And I look forward to seeing you next week and tomorrow. Marie?
Hi there, Glenda.
Oh,
Wow.
I know it's gone late, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's I'll just keep it brief. I'm going to say thank you to Anthony. What's been really helpful of I've been for the last 3 weeks listening to you, is that the whole recap that you did today was really helpful, because it helped to consolidate some of the things you talked about, you know, about the Pope and Dundas Pass and Papal Bull and stuff like that. It helped for me to kind of consolidate that a bit more. So that's really helpful when you go over things like that. I think it's really been helpful having different points of view, like from Glenroy, Martin, Kwaku, because it's like with history, there's so much, it's so rich and so, I don't know, it just exudes so much energy and vibrance from it that it, you know, there's lots of different tangents that we can go off on, aren't there? There's so many different things. And I just kind of love that. So I just like to listen. You know, and I'm quite always aware of the kind of these dominant discourse that prevail, and, you know, the use of language that's been highlighted today, you know, Commonwealth, Stonewealth, enslaved, the whole use of masters when they're not, you know, and thinking about our forefathers and what they went through and our ancestors. So it's just thinking about you know, makes me more mindful about the language that I'm using, not just with us, but with my just day to day. But thank you all. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just looking, have we had everybody? I've not missed anyone besides myself and Anthony. Well, for me, and before I let Anthony close, because he's the chair, of course, it's been amazing. Again, like I always say, something comes. I think it's spiritual. I think Windrush is spiritual. I've said it before. I think it's an amazing powerful contribution that every single person brings to these groups. This group meeting, this group conference every week. I can't believe that it's like, I'm sure it's about 16, 18 weeks, something like that in. Love Anthony. I love how he shares that information. Again, why and where we're getting with this is because I believe that our ancestors, our parents, aunties, uncle, grandparents, and I think Martin hit on it today. My parents don't tell me that their parents or their grandparents were enslaved or slaves. I'm hearing a lot now, and maybe they didn't talk about it before, about Caribs or Arawaks. Very, very proud, very, very proud people. So it's interesting that Martin said what he said. But again, what I've noted is, and I love gospel music, I love music in total, but I also know that music, spirituality, the relationship that our ancestors had spiritually is a lot which sort of, I don't know, not motivated them. I won't say motivated, but kept them alive. Or I just believe that it was very important that we touched on this. And I do see that it's going to be an ongoing weekly or sessions, because we can't do it all in one night. So the idea is, of course, to do a session 2 about Windrush and church. So although it went religion, but it's about the church, what they brought as well. Absolutely fantastic. Great Sakina's here. Glenroy again. Martin, Jen, everybody that's come. If it's your first time, really glad that you could make it. And before Anthony closes, and then Sam, I hope he's still here. Sam always closes with a inspirational, empowering comedy. I'm not going to say joke, a comedy. And then Sam will close. So, Anthony, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yes. Well,
you have to speak up. We can't hear you.
Okay. So I think what I wanted to try to bring out tonight is that although we might see religion as a monolith, and that we expect it to do certain things, there's always differences, and there's always individuals and groups of people that are moving in different ways. And to go back to ancient Egypt and to pick out how they structured their beliefs, and to show how Christianity got its lead from that, is to show that really we've all been influenced in some way by these traditions, beliefs, and they vary all the time. For example, one of the stories that I was told when I went over to Trinidad was about the origins of carnival, how the ancient Egyptians realized that the Nile flooded every so often, and if they could time the flood, then they could plant crops and they could have a civilization. And so what they did was they made these observations in the night sky and followed the stars, and that then told them, once the stars are going to be in a certain position, they knew then the Nile was going to flood. And what they then worked out was that there was a year of about 365 days, but they divided their months up into 12 months of 30. So they had these 5 days left over. And over these 5 days, they had a carnival. And that's when, you know, all the traditions were reversed and they could get messages out about the society and so on. But these traditions then went around the world. So in, you know, India, you'll have a version of it. In Europe, you'd have a version of it. In Europe, they call it carnival. But in the Caribbean, they took their African version of it and fused it with the European. So some of the traditions that you will see in carnival, some of it is European, but some of it is still African. And what I'm trying to say is that that was what happened with religion also, and with languages. Jamaican patois, it's fused, it's English, it's Spanish, it's African. There's different languages mixed in it. The food, it's all mixed. And the religion, it's all mixed. So we can't just think that all these people were held by religion, because it's such a moving feast. They can't all have been held by religion. It's not possible. I've been to church and I've seen people in church, and you might think they're the most docile people. They're not. My mother was one of the biggest Christians going, but I've seen her get into a fight with someone when they hit me. And she was no Christian then. And my dad came running out of the house asking what had happened. And they said, oh, your wife has been laying into this guy. He said, no, can't happen, can't be, not true. My wife is a Christian. But what I'm saying is that when people feel that they've been tested to a limit, they will react. And that's what I think, looking at human beings, I can't think it could have been any different from my ancestors. So when I hear people saying, oh, well, they were just made religious, I feel that is an insult to my ancestors to say somebody just read the Bible to them and, you know, hey, presto, they couldn't fight anymore. No, and when I looked into it, I saw that they were fighting time and time again and over the centuries until they got their freedom. And I just want to come back on something that Sue Lee said about the Bible. When I made the reference to the Ethiopian eunuch, it's about highlighting a particular tradition that there is, that Ethiopia was one of the first countries to become Christian. And historically, that is the case. I wasn't only using the Bible as a reference for that. You can check how long Ethiopians been Christian in the middle of Africa. It's one of the reasons why Ethiopia wasn't colonized, because that papal bull said, you know, they could attack pagans, and Ethiopia wasn't pagan. So you had all the rest of Africa, colonized except Ethiopia, until Italy decided, well, nothing was left for them to colonize. So, you know, they were going to have a go at Ethiopia, but that's another story. So, and again, for Jen, if you look up Professor Hilary Beckles, he's the person who is dealing with reparations on behalf of the Caribbean governments. And I put a little link in the chat, in the chat, where you can get some more information. He'll give you some real structure about what they're looking for with reparation. What it is, it's about repairing the damage. So what would have happened throughout slavery is that people would have suffered a trauma, and that trauma is still manifesting itself in a lot of the populations in the Caribbean. So those are health issues. So they're saying, right, well, we need those health issues being addressed. Also, education. People were denied education for quite a while, and they want to get, you know, education in, infrastructure. The place wasn't invested in. So there's a whole range of things that they talk about when they're talking about reparations. It isn't about giving each person, you know, $10 million or whatever. That's not what people are thinking about when they're thinking about reparations. And with regards to whether Africans are spiritual or not, For Kwaku, I will refer you to John Henry Clark. If you Google him, he will give you some information there. And with religion, it's always been a business. The whole structure of Ethiopia, of churches, it's like a franchise. The Pope used to send bishops out to different countries, and they would convert that country, and then they would have allegiance to the Pope, and they would send some of their taxes to the Pope. So it's always been that kind of structure. So it's and when the papal bulls were issued, they were like decrees that Portugal a lot, and that Spain could make a lot of money off, and that was to get them to attack the Muslims who were going to take Constantinople. So there's always been an economic base to these old issues. And with regards to the payment in terms of compensation, and people think, you know, well, it was slavery was a long time ago. The monies that the slave masters I shouldn't say slave masters, Martin. The money that were paid to the slave to the people who enslaved our ancestors was only paid off in 2015. So that means, you know, the Windrush generation have been paid for their own ancestors' emancipation. So, Michael, are you really interested in the case of a boy being freed or running away? I think you should have a look at the Somerset case. That was a famous case where Lord Mansfield ruled that slavery was such an odious affair that England's air was too pure for it to exist in England, and he released a young man who was going to be taken away back to the Americas as a slave. He prevented that from happening, and that was in, I think, about 1729. So there's always been a debate about the legality of slavery in England. So on that note, thank you very much for listening, and I hope we'll see you all again next week.
Fantastic, absolutely brilliant. Right, Sam, do you want to tell us how you feel about tonight? I can't remember. Oh, you did before. And have you got a great comic tonight? You're on mute. I'm waiting for it. I'm trying to get it.
No, not yet. No, not yet. First of all, another week where it can't come quick enough for me. Tuesday night on Fridays. You need more airtime because there's a couple of people that I love here talk. They get to speak. Joan, Glenda Caesar, that guy from Leeds, of course, then forgive me. Yeah. Anyway, Anthony, Glenroy, you got Martin coming up to challenges. So, another week of brilliant speech. I mean, I love it. I mean, so come again, all newbies and old faces. Yeah, I've got 3 things for you tonight. Yeah, are you ready?
Yes.
Wait, Sam, you're the best.
No.
It's lovely to see you every week.
No, I just love to listen to experts. No,
it's got to be said. Someone's got to say it. We're all thinking it. Now do the jokes.
Oh,
right, ready now?
You have to talk loud, Sam, so I can hear.
Okay, right. Ready? What's the dog's favorite city?
What's the dog's favorite
city?
City.
Yeah.
What's the dog's favorite city?
Yes.
I don't know.
New York.
I was going to say Bonia.
No, two more.
All right. Okay. Number 2.
What do you call a frozen small dog?
Say that again.
What do you call a frozen small dog?
A frozen small dog.
Yeah.
Lollipop.
No. Popsicle.
Say that again.
Popsicle.
Popsicle.
No.
Last one.
Joe's
Last
not
one.
getting it, Sam. Joe's not
The RSPCA is coming to get you, right?
Yeah, he complete. This is the best one, right? Why did the dog walk into the Wild West Saloon with 2 guns, a badge, and a hat? What? What did he say to the bartender?
Come on.
I'm looking for the man who shot my paw.
He's supposed to a 3-legged dog.
Oh my God.
It was
Sam.
supposed to be.
Sam,
What?
thank you very much. Sakib.
Yeah.
Thank
See you on
you.
Friday.
Oh, fantastic.
Till next week.
They were clean.
Oh, fantastic.
They were
Sakib,
clean.
it's been amazing. Dave,
Yeah.
Joe,
Hang on, I've got a joke here.
have
Go
you
on.
Yeah. What do you call 3 men in the shower?
Don't know.
No, I get Martin, Claude, and
Mum.
Glenroy.
What do you call 3 men in the shower?
Go
I
on.
don't know.
Wet.
Oh, God.
Can I just correct something for
Is
Michael?
that a band? Is that
Michael,
That was better than some.
that Somerset case was 1772. 1729 was the York Talbot opinion, and somebody was asking when was the law. I think it's Kwaku was asking when was slavery law made in England. The York Talbot opinion was given for the American states, and they I think was the attorney generals, and they gave an opinion that slavery was legal, and the Americans then used that to enact slavery
When was it?
in their territories.
Did you ask something, Dave?
Yeah, I said,
It wasn't the American territory, it was a British colony still.
Yeah, but they called it the Americas, didn't they? North America.
But Michael, you got a question, and then I'm going to play out with a record. You're on mute. Sorry, Michael. Hang on. Let me unmute you.
Sorry, she's unmuted me.
I've unmuted you, Michael.
Right. Before we sent convicts to Australia, we used to send them to America.
Say that again.
Before we sent convicts to Botany Bay in Australia, transported for 7 years, we used to send them to America.
Did we?
Yeah.
Or did they, should I say?
They did.
Wow.
Is that how we got Trump?
No, we got Trump.
I couldn't possibly comment.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, everybody, for coming again. It's been absolutely amazing. I hope you can join us again next week. I'm going to play out one of my favourite songs. I hope you enjoy it. Cosme and Anthony always, and many of us, catch up with some. Good night, everybody. See you next week.
No, thank you. Stay safe.
You
too.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.